Hello, my name is Tucker and welcome to OneTake DeckTech. I'm a member of Team Bloodrush Fellows here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I'm here today to talk about Jarl Vetreidi, the newest Elemental Guardian deck. A little bit about me, I am the creator of the mobile app FaB Life, so if you do use that, thank you very much for doing that, and if you haven't, please check it out. There are links in the description down below to the app as well as this deck list. I am a long-term Oldhim player, so I got into the game when Tales of Aria first came out. He immediately became my favorite in the game, and I played him all the way through his LL. Here in Colorado Springs, I was the Oldhim guy, so I'm really excited today about Jarl Vetreidi returning the Earth Ice Guardian talent pool. My biggest claim to fame is winning Battle Hardened Dallas in October of last year in Bright Light Sealed. I played a lot of Teklevossen. They called me Tucklevossen, so that was a lot of fun. This deck tech is before Jarl's deck releases, so it's worth noting that a lot of this will change. This is just preliminary ideas and so on, but I think this will be a really great starting point to understand what makes the deck tick and to have fun playing the hero, get that ball rolling and so on. I have printed out proxies and I've played about 20 to 25 games in person of this deck, so I have a decent idea of how it performs, but obviously I haven't been able to play every matchup or anything, so take all of this with a grain of salt. My goal with this video is to get you a good understanding of the deck so that the ball can get rolling, and then you can take it from there and see how you feel. What if you want to change these other cards? So without further ado, let's go card by card into this deck list that I call Winter's Warning. So first of all, you probably know what Jarl does, but for those that don't, let's read his hero ability. It says whenever you play an ice card, you give your opponent a frostbite, as long as they have an open equipment zone. So initially you are like the recent Earth heroes where you are not online at the start of the game, and then once you come online, become a lot stronger. This reads to me like we need to play ice cards, and we need to get their opponent to not have equipment. These are the two goals of this deck, is to play ice cards and strip their equipment. Looking into our own equipment though, we're going to start with the hammer, or the pole arm rather. Sorry, it's a habit. This weapon is really interesting. It is really good sometimes and really bad other times. So far in my experience, it is a weapon that you do not swing at all for the early game and the mid game. But in late game, it's actually really powerful. So it ebbs and flows. I could definitely see players running Titan's Fist, and I definitely think people will be sideboarding Sledge, if not running Sledge entirely in their build. But the fact that this is a one-handed with the heavy property makes it really good with Stalagmite, and so it's at least worth trying. Like I said, in the late game, just, oh, my hand doesn't do much. Here is 6 one-hit Frostbite can be very powerful. So I don't know if it will be the end-all be-all weapon, but it is very powerful. Of course, Stalagmite is going to go into every Jarl list. It is his bread and butter. It is probably the most skill-expressive form of equipment that he has in terms of when you block with this. It used to be, for Oldhim, that you would play Stalagmite, and the opponent like Briar or Vetreidi would play Tunic, and then it was a stalemate. You would not use Stalagmite, they would not use Tunic, and neither one got used, and then they would win the trade by denying you this defensive Frostbite. Well, now Jarl wants to pop their Tunic, and when you take away their Tunic, suddenly Stalagmite cannot be stopped. So that is an interesting angle here, that Jarl has a Stalagmite that Oldhim and Starvo did not. Moving on to the actual body, we're starting with All-in Ice Cap, the new ice helmet. When I first read this card, I thought it was lackluster, and I've really come all around on it. It is really, really cool in a number of ways. So first of all, you'll notice it's very similar to Stalagmite. They serve the same role of being a defensive frostbite giver. Stalagmite, of course, is really good because it gives it twice. All-in Ice Cap only gives it once and blocks once, so you're like, oh, it's weaker. But there are some other little tidbits here. So for example, our weapon is heavy. So I want to give my Stalagmite, not super early, but I would like to give my Stalagmite before my All-in Ice Cap, so then my hammer is heavy, and I still have one more defensive Frostbite on the table for that perfect timing that I can find. Second of all, this says, when this defends together with an ice card. Not an ice card from your hand, not an ice action card, just an ice card. So when this defends together with Stalagmite, you are giving 2 Frostbites. When All-in Ice Cap defends together with Gauntlets, which is an ice equipment, you are giving a Frostbite. So you can trigger All-in Ice Cap without giving any cards from your hand. I believe that this is comparable to Crown of Providence. I'm running both in this list, and I think that into aggro matchups or anything where a defensive Frostbite can really ruin their day, this is just better. And in the matchups where they just have too many tools to play around Frostbite, I'll take this out and run Crown of Providence or some other generic option instead. I'm running Tunic. This build is entirely focused on Pummel and being more aggressive and proactive. So I think Tunic really is necessary for the cost curve and focus of this deck. Gauntlets of the Boreal Domain are interesting. They are not the end-all be-all amazing legendary that we had hoped for, but they are good. So comparing to Crater Fist and the other gauntlets, they are still Temper 2, so even if you never trigger this once per turn action, they are essentially equivalent to the two options you had before, except they are also Earth and Ice. So as Ice card, again, it can trigger all in Ice Cap. As an Earth card, it can be decomposed if you're running a more Earth-heavy build. Again, this list is more focused on Ice. So these can be anywhere from mid to really, really good, depending on your personal Jarl build and how you like to utilize the Earth-Ice type on the equipment, as well as how lucky or not lucky you are with the Mango lineups. And then lastly, Civic Steps. I'm not on Well-Grounded or the new legs because I believe that Civic Steps just blocks more. I like skill expressive equipment, and I believe that there are ways to block a total of 3 with this without getting outplayed, and therefore I think it is just by default better and more flexible and easier to get that full value out of than Well-Grounded, which requires an Earth package that we don't have, or the new leg piece that requires luck in terms of lighting it up with auras and non-attacks. So this is our equipment lineup. Again, it is a Tunic focus build. Stalagmite's great. Here we are. So diving into the actual card by card, CNC starts us off. Again, this is a Tunic Pummel build. We want to CNC Tunic Pummel. It is one of the best plays in the game. Highly recommend it. Same with Frostfang. This is, view it like another CNC, but with a different one hit. It is very powerful when you say 5 and they go, oh yeah, whatever, I'll just like block exactly 5, or I'll just eat the 5 and give you my worst card, and you say, well, actually give me a second card from your hand to take even more damage. Suddenly the life lead expands. This card can be so powerful. It is the one single red ice 2-block that you get to run, although I'm considering Icequake as well. So Frostfang and CNC are core to this because they pair so well with Pummel and just are really good proactive disruption to keep your opponent on the back foot. E-Strike is in for a few reasons. For one, we need Go Again. Guardian has always struggled with Go Again and going wide and applying pressure into things like Enigma. So this is our bread and butter Go Again card. Rouse the Ancients requires big attacks that we may or may not have. Zealous Belting requires big blue attacks that we probably don't have. Outmuscle can be countered by things like CNC, Phantasmaclasm, and such. So E-Strike really is our best go wide card. Secondly, our cost curve is currently 27,033, so we don't really have that many blues. Back in the olden days, you'd run 40, even 42 blues. This is a lot less than that, so you will have hands where you have 3 or 4 reds. And in those hands, E-Strike is the best possible red that you could draw. So E-Strike is really flexible. It lets us go wide, it lets us go tall, it lets us adapt to however maybe a little clunky the hands might be. All around a really good card. I think it's necessary for certain matchups, but I could see sideboarding it out into other matchups, but I believe it needs to stay in the list. We're on 6 Macho Grande. Why Macho Grande over Glacial Footsteps? We have the Ice Fuse 10 Dominate. Why this? It's essentially just that this takes one less card. I'm on Tunic, so I can play this with 2 blues and a Tunic. With Glacial Footsteps at red, there's no world where I can just 2-card play the Glacial Footsteps. It's always going to take that Ice Fuse to achieve the Dominate. So I like Red Macho over Red Glacial as an option. It's more of a sideboard card. It's here in my default 60, but this would be the first card to come out for other cards in the sideboard, mainly as a means to push damage into New, into Enigma, into the decks that are really tanky and require you to push damage and be more aggressive and keep them on a certain pace in the game rather than just letting them get to cycle 2, get to cycle 3, and outvalue you with a better late game. It can be pummeled. You can try and line it up. I wouldn't hold my breath for that, but mainly it's just really, really good at closing that gap, keeping pressure up, and pushing damage, just like Pulverize used to be into Dromai, for example, to push damage. I am also on blue Glacial Footsteps. I think all 6 of the blue 8s are very important. And yeah. Next up we have Mangle. This is basically Jarl's specialization here. It works really well with the Gauntlets, of course, saying if you pitch an Earth card, you can make Mangle into a 6 for 10, or if you pitch an Ice card, you can make it into a 6 for 8 Dominate. These rates aren't as good as something like Golden Sun, but they are very powerful nonetheless. So just as we were talking about how, man, a 10 Dominate is really good and I'm having to pick and choose between which 10 Dominate I like more, Mangle can be a 10 Dominate if you pitch one of your 4 dual element cards. It could also just be an 8 Dominate, which is not quite the same, but is still pretty dang good. So even if the crush effect is not relevant, I expect the card to still be good with the Gauntlets of Boreal Domain because of the flexibility of buffing up this attack. So the fact that it can be buffed, or it could come for an equipment, or etc., etc., I think this card will stay in the list. I've seen discussion about not running Mangle. I think those are valid, but it seems very worth it to me currently. And of course, Oaken Old, one of the most powerful cards in the game, one of my favorite cards in the game. It's an Earth-Ice fusion. It's got Oldhim on it. I don't know why you wouldn't run this. I think it's hilarious that we have more copies of this in CC than in LL, but that tells you how strong this card can be. I don't think there's ever a world where you don't run Oaken Old and Jarl. This is just a very powerful disruption card. You can line it up with Pummel, and there are a lot of times where you play Oaken Old, Fuse Crumble to Eternity, we're skipping ahead a little bit, and then Arsenal this Crumble to play out on a future turn, which is a very, very good play pattern because you want to play out Crumble to Eternity. But we'll come back to that in a second. Of course, we have Pummel. Again, this is CNC Pummel. This is Frostfang Pummel. Occasionally, it's Macho or Mango or Oaken Pummel. Spinal with Tunic and Pummel is even good. So Pummel is very important for disruption, for pushing damage, for getting cards out of their hand. It's the goal of this deck is to be more aggressive and proactive and then sideboard into a slower mid-range plan for the matchups where that's necessary. So I think Pummel and its aggression helps push damage into like Enigma and New and those types of matchups that could otherwise be really tough if you're going on a slower pace. Sink Below, just generically really good. Hand fixing is super important, especially the lower your blue count is, the more Sink Below can be good value. But also Sink Below is very important because Jarl, so far to me, uses life as a resource very heavily. I have 4-card plays that I really want to play. Sure, take the damage, send it back, and we stay at life parity, essentially like Icelander used to, where we're slowly chipping down together, and then I'm going to use my equipment to close out the game. Being able to block from Arsenal, let alone hand fix, is so crucial here that I can keep my cards in hand and not have taken a ton of damage. That Sink Below feels necessary to me. And of course, Spinal Crush to round out the reds is very good against aggressive decks. Again, you could sideboard this out sometimes, but this will more often be in the board than not. It's really, really good into decks like Aurora and Dash.io and Ninja and so on, and it's just a big heckin' number that you can then still Tunic Pummel. So it's all in all a really good card. Let's look at our blue base. I am on Blue Autumn's Touch. I'm like on the fence about this card. I don't think it would be wrong to not run Autumn's Touch. I do have times where I fuse Oaken Old the old-fashioned way with an ice card and a separate Autumn's Touch. It happens. It's okay. It's still a 3 for 5, so this makes me scared for New. I kind of don't want this in my deck just because of New, but I think the extra slight consistency to Oaken Old makes this card worth it until we get better options or reasons to replace it for like deck identity. Like maybe I want to go into a different type of build, like a Count Your Blessings build or something, then of course this would get cut. Channel Lake Frigid and Channel Mount Eisen are both blue ice block 3 cards, so by default it's really hard to argue not to run them. Channel Lake Frigid, of course, is probably the best ice card in the game. You never won't run this. Man, the amount of curse words I've heard my opponent saying just because of Channel Lake Frigid or thank God it's gone and such is always so satisfying that I can't not run the card. But Channel Mount Eisen is a different case. I read this card and thought, okay, it's going to be good for closing out the game. It's when it's like 2-2 and Guardian really struggles to close out the game. They just hammer and beg the opponent to take that last couple damage to die, and it's really hard to close out the game. This will solve that answer. And I started playing, and I thought, this card never really comes up. This is maybe just a blue block 3 ice that I'm never going to play out. But over time, I will say it really has come up. I think it's comparable to Germinate, but is a little bit less than Germinate. I think it can come up and help close out the game, but it won't always happen. And when it doesn't, it's still a blue ice block 3, but pitching this cycle 1 to then play it out cycle 2 does come up more often than I expected it to, especially since my deck is so ice heavy. So Channel Mount Eisen, currently, my opinion, is rising, and it is better than I initially thought it is. Crumble to Eternity is probably the best card in this deck. It is so insane, I cannot believe they printed Crumble to Eternity. This is a blue block 3 ice card, already nuts. It's also Earth, so we can fuse it, and it has text on it. So this is one of the most important parts of this deck tech, I believe. I initially viewed Crumble as an Oaken fuse. I wanted to line it up with Oaken, reveal it, sick, got it. But that's not how you should treat this card. The Crumble to Eternity has text on it. It does a thing when you play it out. It blew my mind too, I know. This says, when this enters the arena, put a -1 counter on an equipment. You need to play this early in your game. I've tried to get into the mindset of whenever I see the first Crumble to Eternity in my deck, I just want to windmill that out. I take a turn off, I put a -1, cool. The Dominate is also helpful. It's icing on the top, it's not why we play the card, But getting this -1 on an equipment turns everything in your deck online. It is so, so crucial. Because now, Mangle is threatening. Now, where is it? Frozen to Death is online. These are the things that you want to be doing as Jarl, because as we said at the start, your hero says 2 things. It says play an ice card and strip their equipment. So something that is an ice card that you play that then strips their equipment is core to your deck, especially early to get this ball rolling. I think it's very, very crucial, and this is why I said earlier that whenever you do get the chance to play Oakenold, Fuse Crumble, it's still in your hand, you put it in Arsenal, then like a turn or 2 later you just play it out. That is such value that you've gotten off of just this random 3-card play that it is amazing. And you don't have to play the Crumble immediately because it does take your action, it does take your turn. So I've had times where I would play Oaken, Fuse Crumble, Arsenal it, they just pass back because of the Oakenold Amazing Disruption. I'll send my hand at them and they'll like, take some extra damage, send back something really strong, and just strip my hand and get the whole momentum back. And so I go from my hand's empty, you got me, good answer, put the -1 on your equipment and pass back. And that feels so satisfying. It really, really is just crucial for Jarl. Next up, Frozen to Death, another just absolutely insane card that I cannot believe they printed. It is a bit costly as a 3-cost action that requires a fuse and takes an action point, but it is so impactful that it is worth all of this and more. This is a 3-cost ice card with an ice fusion. It breaks the mold. If you fuse it, you can just destroy an equipment with -1. Other than a priority window, there is nothing they can do to stop this, and then you trigger Jarl. So if your opponent has 1 open equipment slot and you use Frozen to Death to pop their 2nd equipment slot, you will play this, fuse it, trigger Jarl to give them a Frostbite, then resolve this, destroy the 2nd equipment, and give them a 2nd Frostbite per its own effect. That is so strong and so powerful that it is absolutely core to the deck, regardless of being a blue ice block 3. A lot of matchups will ride or die on your ability to pop your opponent's equipment. So I just played 4 games against my teammate Wes last night, one Zen, and 2 of the 4 games he did not get to block with Traverse the Universe because I destroyed it with Frozen to Death before he had the chance. This is how you win games. I have not tested into Enigma yet, but this is my game plan into Enigma, is all the various aggro, keep the pressure up, and then snipe their Traverse so that they can't just get the free cheeky Mirror Guy or a free cheeky Sacred Art to just snowball me, and to really gun for their equipment. Because again, your hero says play ice cards and strip equipment, so that is what we're aiming to do. Going down the rest of the blues, there's not a whole lot left to talk about. Glacial Footsteps, like I said earlier, blue 8s are really strong. 8 Dominate can be really strong. Sometimes you just need to push the damage. Icy Encounter, I think, is another great ice card. It's a 2 for 4 that blocks 2. Its rate is a little bit okay, but then when you play it and give your opponent a Frostbite, then threaten on hit a 2nd Frostbite, it's really strong. And then pairs with Tunic Pummel for 8, 2nd Frostbite, discard a card. You can really screw some people up just by playing like a blue, and a Pummel. Imposing Visage is my recent change. I haven't tested this out yet, but I just put it into the list at 3 because I really think Crumble to Eternity is core to the deck. There will be matchups where just you need to crumble and then Frozen as fast as possible. So the idea here is that Imposing Visage will search out Crumble to Eternity earlier than I would if I was running like a random other blue ice card. So this used to be Cold Snap. I think Cold Snap is great, but this, getting my whole system online faster, I think is way more valuable than drawing a card that may or may not matter, trying to freeze your arsenal that you may or may not have, etc. Of course, Pulse is in the list. It's a dual element. We run it just for that, but the effect is also really, really good, and sometimes when you have to block really tall or really wide, it can be absolutely stellar. I love this card. It is one of my favorite cards in the game. Would always run this because of Oaken, if nothing else. And then the Winter's 6 of are always going to be in the list. Winter's Bite is one of the best blue ice cards you can run. It strips a card from their hand, and if they're not on Tunic, man is it impactful. And then you just give them a Frostbite on top of it. Really, really good. Winter's Grasp is historically just a blue ice block 3. It was the only one besides Channel, so it was always run for that. Now it is actually a lot better because it's a 2 for 4 that I can still pummel, and it gives a Frostbite. So in the same sense that Winter's Wail was 4 on-hit Frostbite, I view this as a 2 card 4 that just gives you a Frostbite that you can't do anything about, and that makes it a lot better. So this is the default 60. Again, this is an aggro ice list that tries to lean more mid-range as a sideboard when it needs to, but we are trying to keep the pressure up. We're trying to disrupt the opponent, while still pushing damage, still pushing on-hit disruption, ice disruption. And we're just trying to slow them down, play this sort of like whittle down life totals with each other, and then preserve your equipment as much as possible, use your equipment as skillfully as possible to then close out the game. Against Wizard, we're trying to pop their boots. Against Mystic, we're trying to pop Traverse. Just keep in mind that your entire goal is to play ice cards and strip their equipment. Going down to the sideboard to round us out, it's not a whole lot. I have Scar for a Scar, which may look a little strange, but this is Enigma tech. This is entirely for Enigma. As I said earlier, we don't really have a whole lot of go-wide options. This is, in my opinion, the next best option that we have. Zealous Belting is going to be inconsistent. Rouse the Ancients is going to be inconsistent. Scar for a Scar, against Enigma, we're probably always going to be lower life. It's a breakpoint at 4 rather than a 3. I think this will just be our best option paired with E-Strike to go wide and keep pressuring Enigma with damage to then try and keep her board clear and keep us alive. Blizzard and Hypothermia are, of course, amazing, amazing ice cards and are way better than stuff like Warmongers or Weakest Link could ever be because they're more generic tech, if that makes sense. Like Blizzard will hit a lot more decks than Weakest Link will. Hypothermia will hit a lot more decks than Erase Face will. Things like that. Blizzard is also extra good because just like Icelander, when we play this, we trigger Jarl and we give a Frostbite. Jarl says, whenever you play an ice card, he doesn't say during your turn, he doesn't say an action card, he says whenever you play an ice card. So if your opponent sends an attack and you Blizzard it, you say pay 2 or discard and take a Frostbite, effectively taking an entire blue out of their hand with just my blue. That is really powerful. Hypothermia, also just an amazing card. Again, only at 1 in LL for a reason. This helps a ton against specific threats like Tank Dash with her pistol, or Dash IO with boost, or Enigma with Cosmo. A lot of things can lose go again, and even though this takes your action point, it can save you so much damage and take them just beating into your face. I play a 1-card play and pass, they slow down, and I can regain momentum, and that is crucial. Sideboard equipment here is really up in the air. I think Crown of Providence is the big one that I would swear by for now. Again, just because as amazing as All in Ice Cap is into aggro, it's not going to be necessary for every matchup. And so the matchups where I don't think this will really come up much, I'm going to put in Crown of Providence instead to handfix myself and try and get that proactive plan online. I have AB3 here just to test into Wizard, but I have not played into Wizard yet, so take it with a huge grain of salt. Again, my plan is mainly going to be to try and crumble ASAP and then Frozen to death so that they do not have Storm Striders as early as possible. Just get it out of there and then hopefully just AB3 and mid-range to beat them. And lastly, you'll see Snapdragon Scalers here. Again, this deck is more of an aggressive, proactive plan. So Snapdragon Scalers is to pair with Enlightened Strike. So you can essentially 1-card 5 go again. You bottom your card, play E-Strike, choose draw a card, Snappies give it go again, and you have 1 more card left in hand. Historically, this would then go into something like a 1-card hammer. We can't really do that with Summit, but E-Strike and Snappies are paired here for matchups like Enigma and New, where you just have to go ham. So that is pretty much the list. Cards that I'm considering adding back in or trying out next. His block card, I think, could be very good. Again, the core of the deck is to try and strip their equipment, so getting a Mangle earlier would be really good. The reason I'm not running this is it's inconsistent. I don't like cards that may have an effect. I like cards that do have an effect. So you need to play this when your opponent has an equipment with a -1, when you still have a Mangle in your deck, when your opponent is not Wizard, when you have enough blues in your hand to play out Mangle, and so on. So it can be very, very powerful. This card is not bad. I just don't think it is reliable enough to be necessary, and that is a big distinction. I also had Cold Snap. I cut Cold Snap to make room for the Imposing Visage, and I think Icequake could be very, very powerful. I used to run this in Oldham as like a one-of for fun. I think it's very, very strong when it lines up, but sometimes it can be really awkward. So things you can do with Icequake, which let's review, is a 1-cost +3 on-hit Frostbite. So you can play it with CNC. Now CNC is a 9 on-hit Frostbite. You can play it with Frostfang, which is now an 8 on-hit Frostbite and pay 2. You can play it with Spinal for a 12. You can play it with your hammer off of Tunic. There are a lot of ways to benefit from playing Icequake in a more aggressive standpoint. But that said, it is still a 1-cost +3 that blocks 2, so it's on the fence. It needs to line up. It needs to fit into your cost curve well. I think it has a lot of potential. of these 3 cards, it's probably the next one that I would be most likely to try. It can be very strong. Exposed to Elements is really hit or miss. It is doing the same thing that we're trying to do with Frozen to Death, and I think having more sources of that in the deck could be very, very powerful and very impactful. The problem is it's a 2 cost that you then have to fuse with 1 or both elements. It's an instant. It can be really awkward and can definitely screw over your hands. So I'm considering it, but I don't know if it's necessary, to be honest. Sledge, I think, could be very powerful, just especially with a Tunic build. I would not run Sledge with something like Tech Plating, but with Tunic, where you could every 3 turns just pitch 1 blue and send 6, is very, very powerful, especially into slower matchups like Florian, like Guardian, and so on, where you just need to push that damage. A hammer for 6 off of 1 card is way better than a hammer for 6 off of 2 cards. And lastly, Mage Master Boots, I think, could be interesting. I've noticed there are a lot of turns where I have extra cards in my hand. I would love to crumble and then keep going, or I'd love to Frozen to Death and keep going. And with Tunic, you can just Tunic to pay for Mage Masters. So it could be good. I haven't tried it yet. I think it could be good. But that is the DeckTech for now. I'll say it one more time. This is an aggressive, proactive deck that aims to then pivot to a more mid-range, slower plan when necessary, but to try and keep their opponents on the back foot, try and strip their equipment early, play CNC Pummel, Frostfang Pummel, Sink Below from Arsenal, just really keep the pressure and the disruption up as much as possible without sacrificing too much. You tend to use life as a resource to have the room to play out your good hands, which is why blocking defensively is so good. And I think what will make or break a good Jarl player is how you utilize your equipment. My best advice is to save your equipment block for as long as possible. Never just go, oh, well, life's getting low, block. Save it for on hits, save it for synergy with All-in Ice Cap and Stalagmite. Sometimes you want to block with specifically All-in Ice Cap and Stalagmite, get them 2 Frostbites, and just shut down their turn. That can be very worth it. Sometimes you play Civic Steps, and you'll get absolutely punished. This is all the skill expression in Jarl, and I hope you have a great time finding it. I hope you really enjoyed this DeckTech. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the description below. Again, please check out my mobile app, FaB Life. And thanks to Iron Lion Collectibles here in Colorado Springs for sponsoring us Bloodrush Fellows. And thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.